We know it's been a very short while that you've been in office, but you seem to have hit the ground running, hopefully in the right direction. But you've just speak to us about, you mentioned the obvious or the big problem that we have is organized crime. So just talk about that and the relationship as you understand it or as you've come to try to understand it between intelligence, crime intelligence, IPID and IDEC. And some of your thoughts, some of your views.
So, crime intelligence, rebuilding crime intelligence, making sure that it has the capabilities that are required in a modern, industrialized democracy to tackle this growing problem, which is not unique to South Africa. I think it's got a lot to do with the way globalization has occurred, which has weakened states and allowed for trafficking of drugs and other contraband across borders and so forth. So it's a global problem, but clearly South Africa has been targeted. So I think, you know, paying attention to our borders, strengthening our laws and the enforcement of our laws, strengthening our institutions, all our, not only our law enforcement institutions, because it's the vulnerabilities that we're experiencing which expose us to these insidious forms of capture by cartels. So the intelligence capabilities in law enforcement as crime evolves. So I think what we're now dealing with, apart from this transnational problem, I think that a lot of these, we can think about them as businesses with fairly complex business structures, quite often sophisticated uses of our company laws, our banking systems, and so forth. I mean, in some ways, there are vulnerabilities possibly there that are faced across the world. You know, that's why we needed this FATF process. We needed to strengthen all of those institutions and arrangements.
But just in terms of strengthening these institutions, we have these different levels of appointments in strategic positions. The President appoints the National Commissioner, Deputy National Commissioners. The National Commissioner appoints divisional heads and heads of department, like crime intelligence. And then you also have the minister making appointments of someone who's to head the Hawks. And then you have the Hawks and other police rocking up at Katie Molefi's place. And you know, I mean, that's what we're hearing, that's what members of the public are hearing. And they don't understand what is happening.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, I didn't hear well the SC, whether he said that the President appoints the deputy commissioners. I'm not sure whether I hear you well. Clarity on that, maybe I will. You were talking about the President appoints. So
I don't know, maybe wrong. Maybe the minister can help us.
Sorry, appoints the National Commissioner. And if we are going to professionalize the police service, which I think is one of the challenges, so that, I mean, that's the antidote to what has been characterized as political interference, in my view, it's got a lot to do with conflicts of interest, where people with important responsibilities, either as a minister or in senior positions in a department or the police service, mistake their public responsibilities and duties for their private interests. And those private interests may be, you know, to foster, that involves fostering relationships with friends. I think people in public office should be very careful about the friends that they choose. But it could be a private interest in the sense that could be a political interest. In politics, people are ambitious. They seek higher office. That interest is not consistent with one's public duties. So I think this whole area of appointment is important, of the National Commissioner. I understand the National Commissioner, who's constitutionally appointed by the President, that the President, who has been trying to improve matters with the way appointments are made, the head of the NTPP, for instance. In this case, my understanding is that there was a panel of experts who were involved in the process. But in any case, that's the kind of thing we need to look at, because it's very clear that partly what has brought us here is that policing has also been politicized. And I'm very much in favor of an agenda to ensure that the police officers, we should be thinking about them. They have important responsibilities. They are professionals. They have to be highly trained. They have to have the tools and capabilities to exercise their responsibilities. So appointment is very important. How we ensure that in critical institutions like crime intelligence or IPID, the head is appointed by myself, by the minister. But I would favor some re-looking at that matter, because IPID is an independent body. They have a very important responsibility to monitor, to investigate misconduct by the police. So currently the position is that person is appointed by the minister, but it is meant to be independent, and so perhaps that appointment process should be re-looked at. IPID yesterday was before the Portfolio Committee with their annual report. They've done exceptionally well. Certainly from a financial management point of view, and from the point of view of meeting their performance targets, they did very well. The amounts of irregular expenditure were not significant at all. So that was very pleasing, but there's still a conversation to be had about how to strengthen IPID. And I would favor a more independent process of appointment, and I think that it works well when IPID also has a sound relationship with the National Commissioner, who has to respect its role. You need a National Commissioner who values the role IPID plays from an integrity point of view. Again, there's another relationship that is potentially adversarial, but needs to be, but shouldn't be, should be a professional one. And so I think IPID is an institution that we can point to and say, we've done well. We have built, you know, a body. We took that decision. Say we're going to establish a body to investigate police misconduct, which is a problem in policing institutions across the world. I keep making this point, and not to give us, a pass, but because there is something perhaps in the nature of policing which makes policing vulnerable to this kind of degeneration. So from the very beginning, we set up accountability mechanisms. One of them was IPID. In fact, I would say this, Advocate, I think we have a multiplicity of oversight bodies. We have the Portfolio Committee, we have the Standing Committee, in both houses. We have IPID. Now, we have the Auditor General, whose report, who produced an excellent report yesterday on all the agencies. Member James and other members who were sitting here were also in that meeting. An outstanding report. So we have built a strong institution, or the country can be proud of of their capabilities. Now the question is this: with all these oversight bodies, what happens to their findings and recommendations? How do we ensure that those findings and recommendations, which are accurate, which are objective, which need to be followed through on, are in fact followed through on? And that's where I think the system has not worked, the oversight system.
Yeah.
So there's a question perhaps about how these oversight bodies are coordinated. All of them have made important findings over the years that, if implemented, would have prevented us from being in the situation that we are currently in, which I insist is a moment in time, in the history of this country. It's a moment. You know, countries go through cycles with the best institutions. Countries go through cycles. We are going through a cycle. We will come out of it if we do the right things. If we tell the truth, this inquiry process, this process that you are leading, of our democratically elected parliament, carrying out its responsibilities to inquire into the allegations made by General Mkonazi, one of part of the officer corps in the country, and of course the Madlanga Commission. So we can change the picture. And I'm hoping that your inquiry in the Madlanga Commission is going to help with the reset. So crime intelligence, IPID has to be strengthened. I think IPID, we should perhaps be looking at, IPID deals with individual cases, but those individual cases reveal patterns that need attention, systemic problems. And I think perhaps there, we also in the ministry perhaps have missed a beat. You know, that there is information in the IPID reports. And they met all their targets. They exceeded their targets. But in fact, that might tell us actually not only that they're meeting their targets, but there's a growing problem. Why are there so many investigations? Why are so many more matters coming before IPID? And do they have the resources that they're going to need going forward? Because they've also got a considerable backlog. So IPID's important. Crime intelligence, you raised the issue of organized crime. We're not going to win the battle against organized crime if we don't tackle the problems in crime intelligence, which are about accountability, but also about capability. Now, one of the questions that troubles me, and we need an answer. Why is it these problems in crime intelligence have emerged in all these reports and oversight documents, processes that I've talked, but it's over a period of time it's become worse. We haven't been able to use the system to self-correct. I mean, we should be able, where there are red flags, where problems are identified, there needs to be corrective action. The SAP's report before the Auditor General showed that there hasn't been deterioration over the last year, but the Auditor General had raised many questions in the previous audit which were perhaps not fully and properly followed through on. So there's a lot that we can do to correct the problems that are now unavoidable. We now know more and more of the truth. We know more and more also about what needs to be done. And I think this process is going to help.
Now, what would and should also help you, because you invested a lot of time and energy and intellectual input into the work of the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council, and that report was submitted to the President, I think, in August of this year.
Yes, so I should just say, because sometimes there is criticism which of the slow pace of reform, which I think is understandable because the issues are so pressing. The concerns are so serious. But the kind of reforms that are needed in this country are going to take time. And they take time because you are thinking about strengthening institutions, building new ones. Those are big decisions. You know, you're looking at a new paradigm, you're looking at building consensus on the new paradigm, you have to get all the agencies to agree, and I'll explain what I mean a little bit. So for instance, the Council has made a recommendation for the establishment of a new agency. We face some criticism from some people saying,
That's a New Age anti-corruption body.
Yes, what we call
But wasn't that in line with what the Constitutional Court ruled in Glenister?
So, again, it's a question of how you interpret Glenister. Glenister was the question before the court in that case was about a particular piece of legislation which established the Hawks.
Yes.
And in that case, the court quite rightly said, if you're going to fight corruption, you need to establish institutions which are insulated from improper political interference, that have to be compliant with the so-called STIRS criteria, and of course our international obligations. And the institution that we've recommended is so compliant with the constitutional mandates identified in Glenister. It builds on what the SIU has already achieved, so we don't want to start from scratch. We want to recognize what has been built. This country doesn't have inexhaustible resources, either financial or in terms of time. We want that body to be set up as in the shortest possible period of time. So the mandate of that organization, for instance, grows directly out of what we've learned about Tembisa Hospital. Tembisa Hospital has a problem of endemic systemic corruption, and I'm quite sure that it's not the only hospital. And now we're learning that it's also a problem of organized crime, that there are cartels corrupting our systems of procurement in the health sector with such indefensible human impacts. So the body that we are recommending will be able proactively to go into institutions with the relevant capabilities, investigate procurement systems, make binding recommendations, and where there's evidence of criminal malfeasance, to prepare the docket and to refer the docket to IDEC and the NPA.
But now, you just to pause there, because I've also got the benefit, or rather privilege, of working with and in SIU matters that have gone to court. They're very effective and very successful. But the problem is you don't see the people getting into those orange overalls, as they say, and into jail because the standard of proof is different. So you go in, you conduct an investigation, and on balance, on a balance of probabilities, you see now there's clearly been malfeasance, misconduct, and so on, and corruption and theft. But it's and then you like the SOU does, they freeze the assets, take the money back, it goes into state coffers. But the people involved, like Tembisa Hospital, or like this Netcare, Tswani, a medical aid thing that was cancelled, the people involved do not get convicted and sentenced to jail.
So one part of our recommendations concerned prevention of what we call systemic corruption. You have to be able to dismantle corruption before it becomes endemic in the systems. But you're quite right. You have to be able, you have to investigate and prosecute individual cases of corruption under PRECA. And that is where we, as a country, we have made some progress in terms of institution building. I think, for instance, the establishment of IDEC as a more independent body. But the capabilities that are required have to be built, rebuilt, because they were also hollowed out. And that's going to take time. Member Breitenbach and I were chatting a little bit about the challenges that the current NDPP has faced in her tenure. Almost an impossible challenge that she had. So on the one side you need prevention, on the other side you need what we are now calling in the country consequence management. You're never going to win the fight against corruption until you're able to show our people that there are consequences. I can make a fancy argument about why it's important to deal with prevention, why you need a whole government, all society approach. But the public has to support our efforts. And the public will only be convinced that our efforts are sincere and that they can have impact once they see brazen cases of corruption, whoever they may be, are properly investigated and prosecuted. We're not seeing that yet, but I also think that the investigation, that there are problems with PRECA. The PRECA definition is too complex. That makes it very difficult to prove. Our prosecutors are often, there's an inequality of arms. On the other side, they're often very clever SCs on the other side, well-funded, who know how to milk the system. Well, maybe I'm being a little bit unfair, but who know how to defend their clients. And often their clients are criminals. So there are always challenges in the fight against mafia-type cartels. Many of you will recall, well, maybe my generation, but I mean, Mr. Al Capone was never prosecuted for his crimes. He was prosecuted for tax evasion, but they put him away. So we are going to have to get smart about dealing with the gang violence in the Western Cape now. These are very wealthy people. They preside over sophisticated business structures. They can hire the best lawyers. And they are funding young unemployed people in desperate communities where the services are inadequate, where development is failing. That's why they are susceptible to recruitment. So if we want to fight crime, we also have to ensure that we work towards fairness in our society, that we have a developmental agenda that empowers our people with hope, with futures, because otherwise we will lose the battle.
Now, just when we thought that crime intelligence through Brigadier or Lieutenant General Khumalo was beginning to get on the right track, he then gets arrested by IDEC. What are your views or your thoughts on that?
Well, I can't comment on that matter because I do not know from any briefing I've received, and it might not even be proper for me to receive such a briefing about the matters that are being investigated by IDEC. I understand that that a question is being raised about whether this is a prosecution for a trivial matter, for an unimportant matter of an appointment or not. But I know that you are going to be interviewing, well, the IDEC is going to be appearing before you, and they should answer your questions in that regard. But it speaks to the instability in SAPS. I mean, so we're going through a moment where action that is taken by another body, you know, adds to the concern and the instability, if you like, because General Khumalo was the head of crime intelligence. You know, he's now out on bail. It's of course very worrying, and so we've got an acting head in crime intelligence. It's not an optimal situation, to say the least, that to be in. We need stability of leadership in crime intelligence, so that we can start to implement a serious reform agenda.
But what at the very least you can.
May we take Honorable Sangweni?
Sorry, just a quick clarity. Good morning, Minister. Who is the acting head of crime intelligence? I just need that clarity. Thanks.
I think he's also Lieutenant General Mahoti.
Thank you. So, Minister, at least the one thing we can probably accept, that it is of grave concern to you that the head of our crime intelligence has now been arrested by a body which is an anti-corruption body. So the presumption is that he was arrested for some kind of corrupt activity.
Well, I'm indicating I don't know what the answer to that question is. IDEC will have to...
No, I just... Yeah. Just the concern that yeah. Now, because I just wanted to ask you a comment on this, that you again have, that's in SAPS, he or she is appointed by the National Commissioner, but you also have IDEC that falls under the NPA, and is it an issue of competing jurisdictions where they have fights over turf territory? Is it a problem of coordination, or is it a problem with the appointment procedures and accountability?
I think that this particular prosecution raises a separate question. The question you put to me earlier about whether this is a proper prosecution, and the concerns that I would have, especially if it's a proper prosecution, that the head of crime intelligence is being investigated for corruption. And IDEC is going to have to answer that question, on which I obviously can't comment. IDEC's role, IDEC is part of the Department of Justice, and it was established to be independent precisely because independence is critical in the fight against corruption. You don't want senior people with power who might be involved in corruption to be able to interfere with a prosecution, with an investigation and a prosecution of corruption. That's why IDEC has been set up, maybe not, it's not yet fully compliant with the constitutional mandates, but that's a genuine reform to establish IDEC as independent and to institutionalize a system of prosecution-led investigations. That's why it sits in the Department of Justice and not in the police. And honourable members will remember that we used to have, was it called the DSO, but the colloquially it was called the Scorpions.
Scorpions, yes.
That was the model that was implemented. It had a lot of success, but it also there was pushback, there was a reaction, and there were concerns about the manner in which it went about its work. But in effect, and then we dismantled that institution. I think that was a mistake, and we can see that clearly now, given where we are now and the problems we're facing now. We need more of those capabilities to dismantle and investigate corruption. It's an existential threat to this country. So IDEC, I think, was an important initiative of the Department of Justice and the Presidency. It was an important step forward. I don't think that IDEC is yet in a position to fulfill completely the promise that is invested in it to get the results that the country so urgently desires when it comes to these matters. So there are constant complaints about the slow pace of investigations and prosecutions and so forth. But it is not supposed to be part of the police. That's my point. It is well situated and located as part of the Department of Justice, precisely because it needs to be independent, which is what Glenister said, and because because we know that prosecution-led investigations get better results. And we should be looking carefully at whether it has all the resources and capabilities. I think the institution is right. Its location is right. The fact that it's more independent is right. But is it in the position to get the results yet that we need? There's a question about that.
So throughout your address almost this morning, or your evidence, we've got fundamental issues with the resources and capability, almost in every aspect of policing. Okay. Can I ask you a soft question now?
I thought that's what you were doing, but go ahead.
No. Well, you don't need to spend much time on it. We had Deputy Minister Boshelo here yesterday, and I think she explained quite nicely how things for them as deputy ministers have changed since your appointment. So maybe just talk to us briefly about the role of your deputy ministers.
Okay, so my take is, they've been of enormous help to me, and I see them as a team. I mean, it's the minister that exercises executive authority, not the deputy ministers. but they have important roles. So first of all, as a constitutional matter, they are appointed by the president. It's a large department. I've been incredibly busy since being appointed. I don't think I would be able to manage all my commitments without their support. And it's not just attending meetings of the portfolio committee, attending to member statements when I'm not able to. I have delegated, so I should say about both, I mean, Deputy Minister Matale is very experienced, a former premier. He's been in the department for 7 years. He's been a tremendous source of insight and wisdom for me. Remember that I also, was in the position where I inherited an office from the previous minister. I couldn't talk to the previous minister. There was no normal handover, which was my decision, because I wanted police management to understand that I've got fresh eyes. And then Deputy Minister Boshelo, also a very experienced political leader. Both of them are members of the NEC, of the ANC. You don't get there, without being formidable, having formidable political leadership qualities. Of course, they were both there before I came. So even with Dr. Boshelo, I have learned a lot from her. So I've asked her to lead an important project. And we will put a team together to support her, a team of experts and so forth. But I'm worried about gender-based violence. We all are. I think the country has done a lot from a policy point of view, including a policy implementation point of view in this matter. We have, I think most police stations in the country have victim support capabilities. Many of them, most of them do. Many of them perhaps don't. I mean, that's exactly what I want her to look at. And then, of course, we have persistently high levels of gender-based violence. And I have to say that just impressionistically, I'm not talking about the crime stats now. When I visit communities, I get reports and so forth, my sense is that a lot of this kind of violent social fabric crime in many of our communities is well, it's certainly a persistent problem. And that speaks to our development agenda. I think there are levels of desperation in some communities. So gender-based violence, we've got to look again and see what we've done, what we haven't done, and that's what I've asked her to do. So to put together a team to go around the country, all the provinces, all the facilities, and to come back with a report that we can table before yourselves to say where to from here. Now, that will take a few months. And we have to do that, together with the minister responsible for this area of work in the cabinet. But I thought, as from a SAP's point of view, that she should undertake that task, because I have confidence in her abilities to produce this report. And then Deputy Minister Matale, the responsibility that I've asked him to look at this intractable problem, apparently intractable problem in crime intelligence. how do you strike the balance between secrecy and accountability with respect to the secret fund? The ordinary rules of procurement are applicable to this extent. They have to comply with the Constitution, which says that it has to be transparent, the bids have to be competitive, and so forth. But some of those rules, in my view, are not fully, well, let me put it this way, the application of the Constitution to the way supply chain is managed to balance these two considerations, that's where the gap is. And that's a problem we haven't solved in the last 30 years of our democracy. In the old system, they didn't really have that problem to this because they were dealing with what they thought was a political problem, and they were serious about that, okay? But now we have an accountability deficit. This issue that was the experience that we had with a certain head of crime intelligence with the initial M. We do not yet know whether that we have a system to ensure probity and accountability. I was before the Joint Standing Committee yesterday, and they were raising the same issue. So I've asked, this would require legislative reform, perhaps. It's quite a sensitive, complex task, and I've asked DM to deal with that matter, Matale. Now, otherwise, the pressures on the ministry to attend meetings of all kinds, including meetings here, are shared. We, as far as possible, I mean, I would not be able to manage otherwise. DM Matale was the one who was dealing with member statements yesterday, because I was busy preparing for this inquiry. He was invited by the Deputy Minister of Russia to go there, and he went. It was his first time. I asked him to go because the invitation was addressed to me. I couldn't go. And then Dr. Bachello went to China, where she signed a memorandum of agreement. They are accountable, as I am to yourselves, under the Constitution. So I think that, of course, a lot depends on the relationship between the minister and the deputy ministers. Because as I've said, it's only the minister who exercises executive authority. In the end, it's the minister who carries the can, right? And that maybe adds an element of complexity in the relationship or sensitivity. But we work very well together. I am committed to working with them. And as I say, they have been a resource, a source of advice for me, and that's how we will hope we can work, continue to work together.
I think he did. Yeah, I think he did. Sorry, Minister, I'm just checking with my my colleague. Yeah. I think we've covered the ground, Minister, that's in your affidavit. In fact, more than that. Thank you very much. Honourable Chair, that would conclude our section of the hearing today with the Minister. Thank